G'day and welcome to the channel. I've got an exciting video for you today. I finally got to try out the Canon R5. I had a great weekend away with fellow YouTuber and good mate Jan Wegener. He lent me his R5 and I gave him my R6 and we swapped cameras through the weekend. Be sure to check out his channel for his review of the R6. I'll leave a link in the description. So today's video is going to be more of a showcase. I'm going to show you all the images that I took. I'll do a comparison video later on. Today's just about showing you these nice photos. So the weekend started with a trip out to the Bunyip National State Park. This is a wet forest east of Melbourne, so bordering on rainforest. So we're going to get some different birds and it's going to be a lot different to the habitat I have here, which is dry. This will be an excellent place to try out the high ISO capabilities of these cameras. So we got there, we went into this forest and it was really dark. There just wasn't a lot of ambient light. So I knew straight away that I'd have to use some pretty interesting settings to get high quality shots. I started with an ISO of 6400. I set an aperture of 6.3 to give me sufficient depth of field, and that gave me a shutter speed of 1/400th of a second. That should be fast enough to capture sharp shots. We found an old log that we stood up and we put it upright, and it was nice and open so that when we set up about 8 meters behind the perch, when a bird would land on our perch, there's nothing directly behind it, so you get that nice smooth out of focus background. So we both got into our blinds and we waited to see what we could hear and see in the forest. The first bird we saw was an eastern yellow robin, a nice beautiful robin that's quite common in these locations. We tempted it down with a few mealworms. So the first bird landed on the top right of the perch and then another bird came in and landed next to it. I couldn't believe it. So we're firing away the shutter. I was actually focused on the right-hand bird and I suspected that the left-hand bird may not be fully sharp because of our depth of field issue. So the right-hand bird flew off. I've changed the focus point to the left bird, took a few shots of that to make sure that was sharp, and I've actually ended up merging them in post so that both birds are critically sharp. So I really like this next eastern yellow robin shot. Jan actually took this with the R6 and his 600mm lens, but I thought it was worth showing because it's such a nice shot. I love this pose with the bird on the side of the perch. We've got that fern coming up. Overall, I just really like this scene and I just thought it was a great photo. Now the R6 performed really well in the rainforest and I feel like I've been a little bit harsh in my review because it performed well. I think it was almost cleaner than the R5 when looking at the files side by side. The eastern yellow robins were jumping about and a few birds landed right in front of us. I thought I might try the ISO at 12,800. Now I've never purposely shot at this ISO, but I set it at that just to see how the camera would perform. So here's the raw file. I've cropped in heavily. Remember this is 12,800 ISO and it looks pretty good in the raw file, but I used some software called Topaz Denoise to remove that noise. Now if you've watched my videos, you'll know I go on about this software because it just works and it's really, really good. Now if you want to support the channel and you want to buy this software, there's a link in the description and I've got a discount code next to it which will give you 15% off. So I appreciate anybody that's bought it in the past, and if you do decide to buy it, thank you for that. What struck me in this session was just how well these cameras were performing, and I don't think any of my previous cameras would have resulted in such good photos. And that's what you're paying for, I think, with these new cameras, is just their ability to function and work in these really hard environments with really low light. So whilst photographing the robin, I heard the white-throated treecreeper. Now we don't have woodpeckers in Australia, but we do have treecreepers, and you can see them climbing up the trunks of trees. They've got these massive feet and they're quite an interesting bird. So we tempted the bird down with a little bit of playback. We got lucky when the bird landed on our perch and it sort of danced around the perch and we took heaps of photos, and I was really happy when it went on the side of the perch and we got to see the feet, we got to see the nice throat, and we got to see the nice chest. This is my best ever shot I've got of a treecreeper and I was absolutely over the moon. It's not a pretty bird, but it's still a great photo. Now whenever I'm photographing birds, I'm always trying to get a few different poses and eye contact. Now I've done a whole video on eye contact and poses that you're free to check out. But this bird did give us another pose where it sort of looked to my left and there's a bit of open space. And I just really like this pose, so I got that. I'm always trying to capture a few different poses because you're never quite sure which one's the best one for the bird. All right, so we had one more species visit our perch, and this was the highlight of the day for me. This was a lifer. What do I mean by lifer? Well, this is a bird I had never photographed before. I've seen it, but never photographed it. So I actually keep a list of all the Australian birds that I've photographed, and this one was new for me. What species was it? It was the beautiful rufous fantail. This is an absolutely stunning little bird with a nice rufous on its tail, and it flicks its tail around. And so when it landed on our perch, we both couldn't believe it. And we've taken these shots and we were both holding our breath, hoping that it would lift its tail up. It has this distinctive and characteristic tail fan, and we both desperately wanted it, but unfortunately the bird flew off not to return. And we were sort of filled with mixed emotions. Over the moon it had captured this bird, but sad at the fact that we didn't get that epic shot with the tail. It's just gonna have to wait for another time. So that brought an end to our little session in the rainforest. It was getting really dark, but I couldn't help but feel that the cameras had performed extremely well. Being able to shoot at 6400 and 12,800, that opens up a lot of possibilities that you simply couldn't do before. If you can shoot in low light and still get high quality images, that's amazing. I can't stress how amazing it is to review photos and they're sharp, one after another, sharp, sharp, sharp. You got the odd one that wasn't, but the majority of them are sharp, and I've just never experienced that before on a DSLR. We got up really early the next morning and we made our way down to Phillip Island, which is about an hour and a half south of Melbourne. I've never been to this island, so I was excited to see it for the first time. It's fairly well known for little penguins, but we weren't there to photograph penguins, we were there to photograph a Cape Barron goose. Now this goose is an endemic bird to Australia, and it's sort of found in the bottom of Australia in Tasmania. The beauty of this location is there's lots of tourists, so the birds are very tame, which was going to allow us to really test out the two cameras. So we got there early and there was lots of cloud, the sun was just coming up, and I thought, you know what, I might try a wide angle shot. So I had my R6, I put on my RF 35mm lens, and I approached the birds. Because they were so tame, I was able to get them quite large in the frame, and they are fairly big birds. This first shot didn't quite have the coastline that I was after, but I liked that it had three birds and you sort of had the sun coming up, and I was happy with this shot. Now we jumped back in the truck and we went looking for another bird that was closer to the coast. It didn't take us too long before we found a bird in the right spot. Again, I jumped out of the truck, I've approached the bird, and I was happy with this one because I could see the coastline. So I've framed up the bird, taken the shots, and I've made sure to take a couple of exposures because the highlights in the sky were quite bright. And you know, I don't take a lot of wide angle shots because it's traditionally very difficult to do, but I'm happy that I did, you know, incorporate some of that habitat in the shot. Let me know in the comments what you think of these wide angle shots. So there weren't a lot of species on the island, but I did spot a little raven. Now, this bird does occur on my property here, but they're really flighty. So when I saw this bird on this perch, I thought that'd make a nice shot. So we took a few, and overall I was happy with the grass and just the setting. It had a nice feel to it. So I didn't have a lot of photos of this species, so I'll take any opportunity I can to get new photos, and I was happy with this one. So before swapping to the R5, we came across a bird that was in really nice light, and I thought I might try and see just how much detail I can get. How big can I get the bird in the frame? So I got this headshot, I had the 500 and the 1.4, and just look at the detail in the eye. It's just incredible. Now it is fairly shallow depth of field, but you can see the grass on the bill and the warm tones in the background. A really nice headshot that I was happy with. So we came across a couple of birds that were resting, and it made a good opportunity to test out the two cameras. Now, I took lots of comparison shots, which I'll do in a future video, but I was very impressed with how the cameras work. We've got that foreground vegetation that loses focus as it moves away, and we've got the out of focus grass. So overall, this sort of image worked for me. I was guilty of taking too many headshots, I think. I just couldn't help myself because these birds let you get close. I knew it was time for me to try and get some full body shots of these birds, and I went looking for one. I found one that was in the grass, and I couldn't quite get the full body, but I did like how we have that out of focus grass in front of the bird, and then the in focus grass and then out of focus, and just with the bird popping up. Something different and something interesting. Finally, I found a bird that was out in the open, feeding, and enabled me to get this nice over the shoulder pose, which is quite cool. And it is very green, but we get to see the bird in all its glory. Now the final shot that I wanted was sort of a side angle shot. I wanted the whole bird, but just the side of it. So I went looking, and I was over the moon when we found this bird feeding, and this shot is probably my favorite one of the day. It just encapsulates everything I wanted about this bird. We've got the habitat, we've got a nice pose, the light isn't too bad, and overall it just makes a very pleasing scene. So we often get these really out of focus backgrounds, and it can be hard to sort of build a picture of where the bird is. But I feel with this shot you have a real sense of where that bird is, and it just gives it a lot more depth and a lot more interest, I believe. So whilst we're standing on these cliffs, I couldn't help but notice all the gulls that were flying past. So we decided to try out the auto IAF on these flying birds, a bit of bird in flight. And as the birds were coming towards us, the camera really had no issue picking them up whatsoever. You've sort of got a blue sky, and the cameras are smart enough to know that there's a bird there. You just wait for the IAF to go onto the bird, and then you track it and you just hit the shutter. Now the light was fairly poor, but this juvenile kelp gull was coming towards us, and I took a number of shots, and I quite like this one because you kind of had the reef and the ocean in the background, so you could sort of make out what that is as opposed to just the blue sky. And as you can see, the detail held up really well. The next shot, this is the adult kelp gull. Heavy shadows, which is an issue when the light comes up with bird in flight. Not the best shot, but shows you can easily get nice sharp shots with IAF. So I really enjoyed using the R5 over the weekend, and I didn't want to give it back, to be honest. It's like a luxury sports car, I suppose, and the R6 is a reliable Toyota. The R5 just did everything better. It looked better through the viewfinder, bigger files, easier video, just everything about it was better. And you would expect that as a more expensive camera. But the thing that surprised me the most over the weekend was just the performance of the R6. I think I was a little bit critical in my review because it just performed amazingly well in that rainforest. Didn't miss a beat with the geese. You know, they are smaller megapixels, but the photos it does take are really good. It takes amazing photos, and the IAF works just as well. It's just missing a few of those features. Overall, it was an extremely good weekend, and I look forward to doing the comparison video where I'll show you lots of photos of whether those megapixels actually matter, which one performed better with noise, etc. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Leave lots of comments below. I'll answer all the comments. Thank you to all the members that have supported the channel. There's been a number of new ones, so thank you very much. So a big thank you to Jan for lending me his R5, and of course him sharing his knowledge with me. I'm always learning, and it's always great to get out with other photographers because you do always pick something up. And I highly encourage you to head out with another photographer because a shared experience is a good one, and you do end up learning quite a bit. So be sure to jump over to his channel and see what he thought of the R6. Until the next video, take care and see you later. So the weekend started with about got it? Nope, lost it. Oh, you've lost me again.